Hey guys, it's Joe from American Trucks, and today we're going to be talking about the Barricade Extreme HD rear bumper with LED floodlights fitting on 07 to 18 Silverado 1500. Now, this is going to be a great option for you if you're looking for a cost-effective rear bumper that's off-road capable and includes some extras such as these awesome LED floodlights. So what do we have going on here with the Extreme HD? What is this thing made out of? What features is it going to give you? And basically, how much is this going to be better than the factory rear bumper? Well, we're going to start at what this thing is made out of, and that is 3mm thick, heavy-duty steel plating. And in terms of durability, that is going to be a huge upgrade over that factory rear bumper, and it's going to be able to take the abuse that an off-road capable rear bumper should be able to take. It's also finished in that awesome black powder coating, which is not just there to add to the looks, albeit if you were going for that blackout look, this is going to be a perfect match for you. It's also there to serve as a layer of protection over that steel from the elements. Now, one of the biggest features about the Extreme HD are the included lights. These are two 5-watt, 3-inch Cree LED floodlights. They put out a nice modern bright white color temperature around 6000 K. That's going to be a bright white leaning very, very slightly toward the blue side. They have a polycarbonate lens up front and an aluminum housing out the back. Basically, that comes together to make these IP67 waterproof rated, meaning they can withstand up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes, and that is more abuse than these should ever see on the rear bumper of your Silverado. Now, the best part about these guys right here, they're completely plug and play. You get a wiring harness in the kit, hooks up right to the battery. There's a switch included as well as a relay and a fuse. There's some IP67 rated connectors to plug these into, and you're pretty much off to the races. Just to run through the list here, these steps on either side, that's a factory feature. The Barricade integrates those very, very nicely. You get a little bit of tread on there as well, so you get to keep that. If you plan on towing, this bumper is also hitch capable, so no matter what you have, that will fit on there. As far as the trailer plug goes, you also get to keep that. There are two different brackets included in the kit, one for 07 to 13 and one for 14 to 18. You also get to keep your proximity sensors. You can see these 4 pre-drilled holes across the length of the rear bumper. You can transfer those over and keep that feature as well. There are pre-drilled holes for a rear plate right here, and there's another one right there. And this kit even includes a brand new plate light to make sure this is legal in all 50 states. Now, I do have two rather small gripes about this rear bumper. These LED cube lights, they're completely plug and play, no problem with those guys, but it kind of defeats the purpose of this plate light right here. This is gonna have to be hardwired, and again, you're gonna need to do that to make this street legal. Also, right above that, you could see there is no lock for the spare tires, so if that is a worry to you, it's probably a good idea to stay away from this one. Now, if you do like the look of this rear bumper, Barricade even offers you a matching front bumper to tie the whole truck together, and in fact, there's another version of this available without LED lights, which will save you around 75 bucks. For the install here, I'm gonna give it a solid 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. Couple reasons for that. This bumper is heavy to begin with, so you probably want to have a buddy on hand as well as a case of beer so he can help you out with this thing. That plate light is going to have to be hardwired, so that's another reason for the 2 out of 3. And another concern here is in order to get the factory bumper off, you are going to have to unbolt a couple bolts that hold the bed to the frame of the truck. You don't have to disconnect the bed completely, but a couple of bolts do have to come out so we can push this up 1 inch and then slide the rear bumper out. Again, we're gonna show you how that's done in just a second. Now, with all that said, I think you can get this done in between 2 to 4 hours if you come with the right tools. So without any further ado, let me show you what tools you'll need and how it's done. Tools required for this install are going to include an impact, U-joint, extension, socket set ranging from 22 mil all the way down to 10 mil, wrench set from 10 mil all the way up to 21 mil. These Allen keys, which do come in the kit, this is a 4mm, this is a 5mm, some electrical stuff like zip ties, spade connectors, as well as a wire stripper, and I also use some channel locks just to crimp down the spade connector. So before we do anything on this truck, one thing I would highly recommend doing here drop the spare tire out of the way. This is gonna give you a lot more room to work underneath of your Silverado here, and that's definitely a must-do before you touch any hardware on your truck. Now, another thing we're gonna have to do before we touch any hardware is we're gonna have to crawl underneath and disconnect some of our electronics so this bumper can come off without pulling on any of the electrics. First thing we're gonna disconnect, this is basically a master plug. This is gonna go to both of the license plate lights, so it's easier to disconnect here than it is to disconnect at the license plate lights. And what we're gonna do is pull down on that red tab there, and then you can push this in, and that should release the two, and you can separate. Next up is gonna be the trailer plug. We're just gonna pull on this gray tab, similar to the other one, and then we can press in, and that'll disconnect that. Next up here, like I said earlier, we're gonna have to disconnect the bed in order to get our bumper off. And in this shot, you can see it clearly. It's this lip right here is basically going to hit this piece of metal that goes all the way across. And in order to get it past that, we're gonna have to unbolt the bed and basically lift up on this thing so that is going to clear. And what we're gonna do here, take our 18mm socket and an extension. We're just gonna come up through the frame and loosen up these bolts. We're gonna hit this one and then this one over here as well, then do the same thing on the other side. So with the bed effectively disconnected at the back two bolts only, we're gonna come over to the side of our frame rail. This is all the way at the rear. We're gonna trade our extension for a U-joint. These two nuts right here are 18mm. We're gonna remove those. Over here is a 15. We're gonna get that out of the way as well. With those nuts removed, you can pull out this bolt plate, then swap over to the 15 for that last bolt. Now we're going to come over to the other side and do the same thing. Next up, we can focus on this 21mm hardware here. We're gonna loosen that up on both sides, and then we should be able to crank up on the bed and then pull our bumper straight off. Now for this bolt over here, you will need a 21mm wrench to hold the bolt head still, as well as a 21mm socket for the nut. That is a little bit stuck right now, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take the bolt out on this side. And you can see our bumper's loose, however, it is pushing on that thread. What I'm gonna do is pull this back, push up on that bolt, and you should be able to remove that as well. Now, the bumper isn't gonna go anywhere. Again, it's gonna get caught on that lip I showed you earlier. Until we push the bed up, we're gonna have to wait to take this off. So we're gonna hit the other side, lift the bed up, clear that lip, and then remove the bumper. So to lift the bed up, you can see I'm gonna be using a pole jack here. Now, if you don't have one of these, you're in a pinch. The way that I've done this before is you just lay on your back underneath the truck and you can basically leg press the bed up. That'll give you enough clearance you need to get this bumper out, because the way this sits right now is if you pull on this thing, you're just gonna get stuck right there on both sides. So what I'm gonna do is just apply very light pressure on the jack, I put another one up front so we don't tip this thing off the lift. You want to make sure if your truck is jacked up that it's nice and secure. If you are going to use a jack like this one, if you're going the leg press route, you should be just fine since the truck is on the ground. But the bed actually isn't that heavy. So what we're going to do, jack it up here just enough, less than an inch we're probably going to need to get this bumper off, and then we can pull the thing off. So now we have our factory bumper uninstalled. We got a little bit of prep work to do on our new Barricade bumper before we drop this on our truck in its place. Moving down the line here, over here we have some trailer plugs. This one is specifically for the older generation of trucks. This guy is gonna be for the newer generation of trucks. Everything 14 and newer, you use this one right here. We're gonna skip those because frankly, this truck does not have a hitch on it, so there's no point in us doing that anyways. Secondly, we have these guys right here. These are for the proximity sensors. If you do have those, you transfer them over from your factory bumper. If not, you're going to install these plugs. We don't have that option on our Silverado either, so we're gonna stick with those. After that, we'll move on to the LED light cubes, and then we can go back to the truck. We're gonna install this guy here. This is gonna be the guide for our spare tire tubes. So let's get started here. Again, we're gonna start with these plugs, and these are just going to install in the pre-drilled holes along the front end of the rear bumper. Now, if you want to lock these in, the kit does include some bolts for you that you can put in these tabs right here. They're optional for the plugs, but if you are transferring over sensors, I would recommend installing those. Before we drop our fog lights in, we are gonna have to get these mounting brackets installed. Now that is pretty easy. If I hold it up like this, you can see one side has a notch cut out of it. You want that to face toward the front of the light. So we're just gonna grab that and orient it properly and slide it in between the fins. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring that straight back, and the idea there is it's gonna provide a little bit of a slide. You can drop a nut in, and in theory, that fin is cut out to hold that nut still. So with that nut being held still, we could come in from the side with the bolt and thread the two together. Now, once you have the thread started, you could use the Allen key included in the kit to snug that up. We're gonna do that for the other side of the mounting bracket, and then we're gonna do the same exact thing on the other light as well. So with the hardware in place, we can put our mounting bracket where it needs to be, and that can go off to the side. For now, we're gonna do the same thing for this light as well. And again, you just want to make sure that notch is toward the front of the light. That's going to give you the range of motion you need. Then we could drop the nut down the fin and get the hardware started through the side of the light. And same thing goes for the other side too. So now we can go back to the bumper and install this thing, and how we're gonna do that is we're gonna take this bolt that comes in the kit, and that's just gonna push up through our bracket. Now, this bracket does have slots in it, and that's basically gonna hold the bolt head still, so we don't have to worry about getting a wrench in there. Then we can come in from the front, and what we're gonna do is basically feed in our plug-and-play connector. Then we can line up that bolt with one of these 3 slots here. You basically have 3 choices where you want to put this thing. But once you have that sorted out, you can come in here with the lock washer and 13mm nut and lock it in place. We're going to install the other side here by doing the same exact thing. So our new Barricade bumper is completely built up here, and before we start to work on our truck, I figured now would be the perfect time to set it down on the floor next to our old factory bumper and point out some of the key differences between these two and basically what is going to make this Barricade bumper so much better than the factory one. Now the first and frankly the biggest difference between these two, it's also the most obvious, it's going to come in the looks department, right? Obviously we're ditching that factory chrome and plastic styling in exchange for some awesome, aggressive, more modern looking black powder coated steel. Now that black powder coat looks awesome. It's going to be a great match again for any blackout look, but again it's also going to provide a little bit of protection over top of that 3mm thick steel. That's going to be an upgrade in terms of durability for the rear of our truck as well. This metal, this chrome, it's not really that thick. It's not going to be able to take the abuse like some heavy duty steel plate would, so that's an upgrade in terms of durability for sure. In terms of features, this one's going to be a pretty obvious one as well. We're adding some LED floodlights back here. That's going to provide a nice little bit of utility if you're doing any work behind your truck, let's say on the trail or at the work site. That's going to be a great feature, definitely something you want to have. That's all well and good, but what I think sets this Barricade bumper over the top is just how many features you get to keep from that factory rear bumper. Just to run through the list here, if you do have a hitch, that'll transfer over just fine, as well as the trailer plug. Again, I touched on, you get both brackets depending on what generation Silverado you have. That will work out just fine. If your truck is optioned with proximity sensors, those will transfer over as well. You get to keep those steps on each side. They're gonna allow you easy access to the bed, just like the factory rear bumper. And on top of that, this has some pre-drilled holes for a plate and a brand new plate light. So at this point, our bumper is ready to go. Basically what we're gonna do now is head back to the truck. We got a little bit of prep work to do over there, as well as this spare tire access tube. We're gonna put that in place so we can install this later. So let's head back to the truck and get that done so we can get this thing mated up. As far as this guy goes, we're just gonna slide that on like so. We're gonna leave that sit there until later just because it's easier to put that onto the bumper once the bumper is installed to the truck. Now that brings us to the more important portion here. That's gonna be our mounting bracket. You wanna make sure you grab the right one. You can see this one is marked with a P for passenger side, and that is basically gonna sit in the frame rail just like so. So in order to attach this with the first bolt, which is gonna be the smallest, you wanna come all the way up to this top position. That's gonna take the 16mm bolt head. And then on the other side here, we're going to install our flat washer, as well as a 17mm nut. For the second bolt here, basically what we're gonna do is come to this position right here. This is gonna be the medium-sized bolt. That is going to be an 18mm bolt head, and it's going to install on the other side with a 19mm nut. For the third bolt, we're gonna come to this lowest position here. This is gonna be the biggest of the three. That's gonna be a 21mm bolt head, and on this side, a 22mm nut. We're gonna tighten all of that down, and then we're gonna do the same thing for the other side too. Now before we mount this up, again, all the hardware on here is slotted, so if you need adjustment on those brackets, you can loosen them up later on, make any adjustment, and then tighten them back down. Now, with this vaguely lined up, all you're gonna do is hold the bumper up to those brackets, you get the bolts started through, and then just finger tight. Then we're gonna crawl underneath and install the rest of our hardware and tighten it all down. Underneath of our truck, you can see the 2 bolts that I just installed. Basically, align your bumper, then you can tighten it down with a 21mm wrench and 22mm socket. So next, we're gonna tighten the bed back down. In hindsight, you should do this before you install these brackets because Barricade doesn't cut this part out of it. If you do wait until the end and forget about it like I did, what you're gonna have to do is just use a ratchet to get around that. Now we're gonna tighten back down the bed, and if you look closely, you can see we lost the cutout here to get through with the extension. The Barricade brackets don't have that, so what we're gonna do instead, you can see I already have the bolt started up here, and we're just gonna finish that off with a ratchet and 18mm socket. The positions further toward the front of the truck though, they're not impeded. You can still go right through the frame rail with the bolt and a socket to get those in place. Now we're gonna do the same exact thing for the other side. So next up, we're gonna do our spare tire guide tube, and the way that's gonna work is we're just gonna take these small button head bolts that come in the kit, they look like that, and a flat washer. We're just gonna pose that through, line it up with the tube. And then over here, just gonna tighten that down with a 10mm nut and another flat washer. This one over here on the outside you can get with the impact, but for this one on the inside, you're gonna need a 10mm wrench. On the other side of this, for the button head portion of the bolt, I'm just using a 4mm Allen key that actually does come in the kit with the bumper. So now we're gonna do some wiring. We're gonna start with our positive terminal here. First off, we're gonna loosen up that 10mm bolt and slide on our positive contact. Once we have that in place, we can tighten that back down and do the same thing for negative. So next up, we're gonna mount up our relay, and you can probably guess by what I have in my hand, there's really not a great spot to hard mount this at. That's okay, we're gonna zip tie it. This mounting tab right here looks like a ground, but it's really not, so you can put this anywhere you want. And where we're gonna go is on the underside of this lip right here. And we can tuck the rest of that slack down next to the battery. Two things left for us to do. The first thing we're gonna do is handle these plug and play connectors right here. These are nice and waterproof, but they are not heat proof. So we're just gonna route these down the engine bay underneath of the truck, and we're gonna make sure to keep these away from any hot or moving components. Secondly, we're gonna take care of our switch. Now, this can be tricky to get it into the cab of your truck, but the easiest spot I've found is right here, this big rubber grommet. If you push that in, it should make a hole big enough for you to slide the switch through, and then you could push this back out to reinstall it and seal the cab of your truck. Now, once you have that started, you can come over to the other side, and that should pull right out of the driver's footwell, and you can mount this guy up wherever you want. It's got that adhesive back on there, so we're just gonna pull off that sticker. One thing you do wanna make sure of, this wire stays away from any of the pedals, and then you can press that in place wherever you want. Now we're just gonna feed all those wires underneath of the truck, and once we get back here, you can plug in the waterproof connectors. We're gonna do the same thing for the other side, and then the kit includes a bunch of zip ties for you to wire manage this whole thing. Again, good rule of thumb here, you wanna make sure you avoid any hot or moving components with the wires. Now, one thing left, and in order to make this thing street legal, you have to install this license plate light. Now, it's gonna come with bare pigtails on the end, just like this. You can see that there's already a little bit of wire stripped back. You can basically do whatever you want with this thing. You can hardwire it in. In our case, we're gonna use these plug and play spade connectors. You could vampire clip these in if you want. This is really up to you, however you wanna wire this, whatever you wanna wire it into. But you wanna make sure that this turns on when your truck turns on in order to make it street legal. So you wanna make sure that there's a little bit of copper exposed there, and I'm just gonna slide on our spade connector. Now, I don't have a wire crimper, so what I'm gonna do is just crimp it down with the channel lock. One more extra squeeze. Just gonna give that a pull to make sure it's nice and tight, and that is not going anywhere. We're gonna do the same thing for the black wire as well. So now we're gonna go over to our truck, and we already have the female side all connected up to that master plug that we disconnected earlier. Now, I can't speak to wiring. Again, your Silverado wire colors might be a little bit different. You just wanna make sure you're splicing into the right stuff in order to power this thing when it should be on. We're just gonna feed the wires through this lower hole in the bumper, then align our light, and snap it into place like so. Then underneath, we're just gonna plug in our spade connectors. Now guys, that is gonna do it for me. It's also gonna do it for the Barricade Extreme HD rear bumper with LED floodlights, fitting all 07 to 18 Silverado 1500s. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this one. Keep it right here at American Trucks for all things Chevy.